I have some revealing information about the man Donald Trump has appointed to be the interim head of the Social Security Administration. The Washington Post got their hands on some audio recordings of things he said at the agency, and then ProPublica has released even more information from those recordings, and they are very revealing. A little glimpse of truth coming out. Also, I'm going to end up saying a few good things about this man that I feel as a Christian are truthful and therefore warranted. I've been preaching to MAGA Christians for years that you guys say you're Christians and yet you're drowning in lies. But the MAGA people have in essence told me that they feel they have to lie in order to beat the Democrats. But we have to remember, if we're Christians, then we have to play by a different set of rules. And I'll admit that set of rules doesn't usually look like a winning strategy. But isn't that what God always wants to see if we're willing to give up the things of this world to live in obedience to Him? So if my highest goal is to win political power, I'm going to have to ditch the biblical rules about telling the truth and play by the world set of rules, which says lying is fine as long as it helps you win. But it's not fine in God's eyes, and it will bring no pleasure to Him. So if you want to please God, you have to ditch the lies and tell the truth, which may make you lose battles in this world that you could have otherwise won. But as my friend Paula says, her father, I believe it was her father, always said that God is perfectly capable of dealing with the consequences you may suffer as a result of your obedience to Him. I love that. Well, okay, before I get into these very revealing things that the interim head of Social Security was caught on tape saying, I'll invite you, if you like to look at politics through a Christian lens that doesn't compromise with worldly values, to like and subscribe, as it will help this channel grow and add to some of the other new conservative Christian voices on YouTube that put pleasing God ahead of gaining political power. All right, now, this is where we're going to get into some of the things the current head of Social Security, Leland Dudek, has said. And I don't know if I'm saying his last name right. It's spelled Dudek, so I'm assuming it's Dudek. Anyway, the things he said, they're not all bad. Now, I'm anti-MAGA, and so if I played by the rules of the world, I would criticize every MAGA person and never say a nice thing about them. But this guy is MAGA. That's why he's where he is. And I'm going to say some nice things about him today because I believe they're true. I don't believe this guy is all bad. At least he's not all bad if you're not MAGA. Although to the MAGA crowd, these comments, as gentle and subtle as they are, will be completely disqualifying and paint him as one who has failed the MAGA ideological purity test. You can't disagree with them on anything. They'll be calling him a rhino and woke, all those things before you know it. But let's take a look at the article. This was published in ProPublica this month, which I know MAGA people think is super left-wing and progressive, and maybe it is. I don't know a lot about it. But read this. Let's read this article and tell me if they're being unfair. I'm not picking up on any unfairness here. Let's go to the article. Okay, the president wanted it and I did it. Recording reveals head of Social Security's thoughts on DOGE and Trump. Since the arrival of a team from Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, Social Security is in a far more precarious place than has been widely understood, according to Leland Dudek, the acting commissioner of the Social Security Administration. I don't want the system to collapse, Dudek said in a closed-door meeting last week, which was about 2 or 3 weeks ago now. He also said that it would be catastrophic for the people in our country if DOGE, get this, if DOGE were to make changes at his agency that were as sweeping as those at USAID, the Treasury Department, and elsewhere. So to me, that's a good sign. He doesn't want the collapse of the system, so that's good, although he did some weird things last week, which I talked about on an earlier video. Dudek's comments delivered to a group of senior staff and Social Security advocates attending both in person and virtually offer an extraordinary window into the thinking of a top agency official in the volatile early days of the second Trump administration. The Washington Post first reported Dudek's acknowledgement that DOGE is calling the shots at Social Security and quoted several of his statements. But the full recording reveals that he went much further, citing not only the actions being taken at the agency by the people he repeatedly called the DOGE kids, but get this, but also extensive input he has received from the White House itself. There you go. I mean, the White House is deeply involved in every detail of everything we see going on at every agency. I fully believe that. Now, a participant at the meeting asked him, why don't you come out more forcefully against what the president is claiming, these false claims that, 110-year-olds are receiving Social Security? And here's what he said. Look, this is not the strongest statement in the world, but you know what? It's a statement where it shows he's trying to gently nudge them toward the truth, I think, a little bit. He said, so we published for the record what was actually the numbers on our website, on the Social Security website. This is dealing with, and then he says, have you ever worked with someone who's manic depressive? I mean, you can read through the lines, but I think what he's saying is, I want to put the truth out there, but I don't want to do it in a way that's going to enrage him so much that he can't hear it. So if he does it in a non-insulting way and in a, this kind of gentle way, he's getting the word out that these numbers aren't accurate. And he'll talk about that a little later on, down further in this article, about what's inaccurate about them. Pretty interesting. And pretty interesting that DOGE and, all those guys would miss this, although not surprising at all. Okay, so this goes into his bio. Then down here, he was largely unknown, even within the agency. But in February, he suddenly vaulted into the public eye when he was put on leave for surreptitiously sharing information with DOGE. It appeared that he might lose his job. But then he was unexpectedly promoted by the Trump administration to the position of acting commissioner, while the permanent commissioner is right now still going through Senate hearings for confirmation. At that time, he seemed unreservedly committed to DOGE, to the DOGE agenda, writing and then deleting a bellicose LinkedIn post in which he expressed pride in having, get this, these are the things he expressed pride in doing. This is what I read about him last week, and I'm like, this is not a good guy. This is a big super MAGA guy. And then today's article sheds a little more light on it and, rounds out the picture a little better. And I see it's not as black and white as people would like it to be. So he, on LinkedIn, he posted and then deleted a bellicose post in which he expressed pride in having bullied agency executives, shared executive contact information, bad, all this is bad stuff, and circumvented the chain of command to connect DOGE with the people who get stuff done. So back then, he was fully on board with DOGE. He was doing everything he could to help them, do what they wanted to do. But now, only weeks into his tenure as the head of the agency, he was taking a far more ambivalent posture toward not just DOGE, but get this, Trump himself. On multiple occasions during last week's meeting, according to the recording, he framed the choices that he has been making in recent weeks as the president's agenda. These choices have included planned cuts of at least 7,000 Social Security employees, buyouts early into retirement, all that. The entire Social Security agency has 57,000 employees. They're looking to cut about 7,000, which is about 12%, which is huge. But here's the important part. They want to cut people, including those who work in field offices and teleservice centers helping elderly and disabled people navigate the program. Cuts to disability determination services, the dissolution of a team that had been working to improve the user experience of the SSA.gov website, and the application process. When I read this and see that this agency even had these things, you really get a sense of what a good job they were really doing. I know there's, tons of bad stories. I tried to call Social Security and I was on hold for 3 months before anybody picked up. And then when they picked up, they hung up right away and I had to call back and do it for another 3. I know all those stories. But look what this agency had set up. They understand who their, if you call them this, clients are. Elderly people, disabled people, people who have trouble getting around, people who can't just jump into the car and drive down to a Social Security office. They had all these things set up, and now these people want to come in and destroy it all, literally blow it up. And at the same time, they want to require people now to, if they're on Social Security and say they want to change their bank account, I have a new bank account, the old one's closed, got to send the money to the new account. They have to actually go into the Social Security office in person. That's what they're saying is their plan. That's insane. You have a 94-year-old disabled grandmother. How is she going to go in to the Social Security office? And especially with these wait times that are going to explode because they're firing 12% of their staff and closing offices on top of that. Anyway, back to Leland Dudek. He went on to say, I work for the president. I need to do what the president tells me to do. That's according to the recording. I've had to make some tough choices. And then get this, he says, choices I didn't agree with. But the president wanted it, and I did it. All right, well, that's the difference between him and the people who were in the first Trump administration who, would protect the country from these horrible choices and things that Trump wants to do. They just wouldn't do it. But now Trump has people in place who are so MAGA, they know it's not right. Some of them, this Dudek seems to know it's not right, which I appreciate and give him credit for that. But he did it anyway, which really, that's it. That's his job. He was appointed by the president to do what the president wants, no matter how stupid. And I'm actually kind of for that because if we keep protecting him from the consequences of his actions, then people will never understand that his actions were horrible. They'll never know who's to blame for these things. They'll never understand that all these things he said he would do, he actually meant them. And even if they thought he meant them, they didn't realize that it would make bad things happen. I honestly think most people thought, oh yeah, he's going to cut everything, but he's only going to cut the bad people, the people who are wasting. They didn't know all this was going to happen. Although all the non-MAGA people knew that this is a nightmare and don't do it. Don't let this guy anywhere near the government. Anyway, Dudek also more than once dismissed Trump's claims. This is important because people will ask you about this. They'll say, well, wait, they're paying, Social Security to 110-year-olds. Well, here's the answer, straight from the guy, the head of the agency right now, the temporary head, in, moments where he's being really honest. So he more than once dismissed Trump's claims about Social Security fraud, which the president had amplified just hours after Dudek's meeting in a speech to Congress, which was his State of the Union speech a couple of weeks ago, in which he implied that millions of probably dead people over the age of 100 are receiving Social Security benefits. There are indeed 110-year-old people in one of the Social Security databases, Dudek said. This is a quote from him, although it looks like they left off the quote marks. But he says there are indeed 110-year-olds and older people in one of the Social Security databases that the DOGE team has been looking at, Dudek said. Read my phrase in red here. But those people are not in pay status. They're not being paid. So Musk takes this and goes to the president, runs to the president. Guess what? We caught them paying millions, billions of dollars to dead people who are over 100. How insane is that? That's why you can't do it like this. You can't send in 20-somethings who have no training as auditors, no training even in accounting, and no training in government agencies and how they're run, and no training in how specifically the Social Security computer system is run. Dudek knew immediately that this was some database that, we don't use. It's not used for payment information. So he knew. The fact that they've done all of this in 2 weeks from the time the president took office, within 2 weeks, a lot of this was starting to happen. The fact that within 2 weeks, they went into all these government agencies and said, look what we discovered. That short amount of time should be all the proof you need to know that they're not doing this right. Because to do it right takes people who are very knowledgeable, not only in the specific government agency, but in auditing techniques and in their database, structure and how their databases are organized and how their systems run. They have to know their systems. If you don't know that, you can't do an audit and find waste, fraud, or abuse. You'll find things like a database that's no longer in use that has 100-year-olds in it. Okay, but you didn't find anything because no money's going to those people and you're wasting your time and you're wasting our taxpayer dollars. This, honestly, I'm telling you, when this comes out and it's all said and done, this is going to be the biggest government boondoggle ever. This is, we're going to find out someday, hopefully soon, this was the most inefficient thing that the government could do, this DOGE thing, going into these agencies like they're doing. It's literally going to be known as the Department of Government Inefficiency, DOGI, doggy. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, doggy. We're going to call it doggy from now on. Anyway, that's the state of affairs, and I thought you would enjoy hearing about this guy who actually I appreciate for coming out and saying some things that are true. Couldn't do it publicly, I understand that, but he did do it. So let's see if he gets, or if he gets, let's see how much hot water he might get into now that this has been made public. Well, that's it for now. I appreciate you watching and like and subscribe if you like, and I'll see you next time.